you talked about you in around 2009, you were working with Polaris.
Yeah.
You started restaurants, but for the environment reasons or for any other reason, that didn't work out. So my question to you is like, what made you to enter into this business first? And then once you were out of it, what were the lessons learned and what would you advise to people who still want to start a restaurant today also?
Okay, good. So first thing, yes, a lot of lessons learned from the first experience. But when I see it in hindsight, it was, if there is someone who needs to be blamed for what all this happened, it's me. Right? And this is the biggest lesson I've always learned, and I've been practicing that. Every failure, if there is anyone around me or that happened to me, it has only come to me because I have allowed it to come to me. And the buck has to stop here. So the responsibility, the ownership, right? As someone has rightly said, no one cleans a rent a car. You have to own it. So मेरा फंडा यही है कि I must be blamed for it. And I know in hindsight now, when I see 10, 11 years down the line, maybe even more, that I was a kid, honestly. A lot of mistakes
enthusiastic,
that I did. Yeah, very enthusiastic. Right. जोश ज़्यादा था, होश कम था. I wanted बड़ा रेस्टोरेंट होना चाहिए, रौपंगी में होना चाहिए, ये होना चाहिए. हाँ, सारे पैसे डाल दूंगा, कल से पैसे मिल लेंगे. And that, I think, in today's world, if you think well, you won't get into that. It's a game of patience and passion. Again, the same thing that I would correlate with Furusan, the earlier, for the investors, the two attributes I talked about. I think tremendous passion, tremendous. You need very good passion to run a restaurant. I just went through a video that said, अगर आपका कोई गहरा दुश्मन हो, तो उसको आप रेस्टोरेंट का बिजनेस दो, right? It is as difficult because every day it's going to be a turbulent life. And big difference that I also see in Fudosan versus restaurant. In restaurant, you are rated every day. सुबह तो अच्छा था, लेकिन शाम को exactly सुबह अच्छा था, लेकिन शाम को ना साला नमक कम हो गया. And that is where you are rated every day. रोज आपको अब कितना भी अच्छा करो ना, अरे हाँ यार खाना अच्छा था, लेकिन बिल करने के लिए कितना टाइम लगाया, अब पानी आने के लिए इतना टाइम लगाया, खाना तो अच्छा था, सब हुआ लेकिन खाना ही अच्छा नहीं था. And whatever.
So service, customer expectation.
Fudosan में you're not rated every day. You're rated only when the person checks out, or in between Wi-Fi नहीं चल रहा है सर, ये नहीं हो रहा है, वो रहा है, which are decent problems to solve. So I think restaurant is a very tough business. So you need to think twice, thrice, 4 times maybe before you get into it. And there are a lot of other logistics. It's more about a logistic business.
Absolutely.
It's a very difficult business to manage, and managing cooks for that matter is very difficult. Right? So restaurant is a very difficult business. But if you have a passion, I mean, take an example of people who have actually running very successful restaurants in Japan also. Let's take, there are people like Anil Raj, a great human being and a good leader. He has been running like Nirvanam. आपको याद है Nirvanam? खाना क्या quality था, right? There's a passion in it. It's not just running a restaurant in Khamiacho.
Right.
The food quality was so tremendously good, and he waited for the first restaurant. You can see first restaurant से आज कितने होंगे, 6-7 restaurants, 8 restaurants हैं. 8 restaurants बनने के लिए काफी टाइम लगा, यानी सेकंड से 8 के लिए टाइम नहीं लगा होगा, बट फर्स्ट से सेकंड होने के लिए टाइम लगा होगा. आई एम श्योर फॉर दैट. 0 to 1 and 1 to 2. Yes, it takes time because he also waited for the right time. कि मेरा नाम बन गया है, क्वालिटी है, आई एम confident enough to sustain that. But ये ना passion अंदर से होना बहुत जरूरी है. Wherein ideally, if you have a family that has come from restaurant line and all, ideally, right? एक अंदर से जब आता है ना वो business, तो वो ज़्यादा अच्छा होता है. You need to be a cook.
Right.
From inside, you need to be a cook.
Kind of serving and
serving, hospitality, ये सब अंदर से होना जरूरी है. 4 दिन आपको अच्छा लगेगा, 5वें दिन से बहुत difficult हो जाएगा. So restaurant is a very tough line. You should think, take a very, क्या कहते हैं, it's a conscious decision that you need to make before you make it. Because एक बार करने के बाद आप वापस नहीं जा सकते हो.
Right. Got it. So I think you kind of summed it in a way what would be required to have a kind of a successful restaurant. But sorry, coming back to like if you have to pick 2 to 3 points, I understand like you took blame on yourself, and that's really good and humble of yourself. But just as an advisor to someone, what were those top 3 mistakes you might have done? And if given a chance again, that would be a different approach.
That's a good question. In fact, the first and foremost, start humble. Small होना चाहिए. रुपंगी वगैरह doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because for a business, actually these are all fancy items. मेरा एक रेस्टोरेंट है रुपंगी में. Actually it started from that. वो था. But अब मैं समझ गया.
Now you understand.
See, now in Fudosan, मेरा एक बिल्डिंग Kawasaki में एक कोने में है. But चल रहा है. Profitable है. That is more important.
Yes.
So profit होने के लिए it's not necessary that you need to be at a fancy place. The expenses are also going to be high, right? Absolutely. That I realized, that was my biggest mistake. So Roppongi I realized that my costs have gone so high compared to the Gyotoku one. I was more happy with Gyotoku. So you need not necessarily be there. That's one. Meaning वो आपको ऐसी जरूरत नहीं है कि you need to spend a lot. Start a very minimum. First, see that people like you,
your food,
right? And second aspect, right? People ultimately come for the food quality.
Food quality.
अगर आपका खाना खराब है, आपके पास कोई, आप कितना भी बढ़िया करो, कोई नहीं आएगा.
Right.
But आपका बहुत ही मैंने ऐसे भी रेस्टोरेंट्स काफी देखे जो इतने ढंग के नहीं है, दिखने में कुछ भी नहीं है उनके पास, लेकिन खाना बढ़िया है तो लोग कोने से
जाएंगे
लोग सिर्फ खाने के लिए आते हैं. That is their main objective. वो आपने जब तक अच्छा किया, but जैसे ही आपका ये हो रहा है, when you settle down, the third aspect is that you need to be professional in all your aspects. Cook से लेके सब सारा hospitality कैसा था and all that matters. So that is one that I think I learned from my mistake. And maybe one more to add, right? It is also about the timing. So you have to, when you invest in restaurant, right? Invest in such a way that I am going to be here. I've observed this since I also work for a company which is specifically into credit. So I have a lot of, we get a chance to see a lot of companies' data and what's happening. So they say that in Japan, or maybe this might be global, I'm not sure, but Japan के बारे में मैं confidently कह सकता हूँ. Most of the companies or enterprises that are started, they close in the first 3 years. If they have sustained the third year, they are there to go long. Very few companies actually die after 5 years or so. Okay, but first 3 years may die down.
That's a global trend.
That's a global trend. Yes. Thanks. Yes. Okay, but that is where sustainability मैं 3 साल sustain करूँगा regardless of the scenario.
That's true.
That is a very, very important aspect in terms of a capital.
Correct.
That you should have that appetite and capital enough to sustain for 3 years. If you have completed 3 years, you're there to be there for long term. That's what I see.
So I mean, first one, place is not important. I mean, equal to keep your running expenses low.
Yes.
Second, as you said, food is the most vital part. Don't forget the core part. Third, I mean, get into this business if you can sustain for 3 years. You have capital to.
Yes, correct.